We all sometimes dream of completely changing our lives, leaving everything behind and starting anew. For most of us, this remains just a dream. But what if Keanu Reeves turned this dream into reality? What if the star of Matrix, John Wick, and many other films woke up one day and said, "Enough is enough"? Fame is a strange phenomenon. It offers wealth, adoration, and opportunities, but it also takes away the simple joys of anonymity and normalcy.
Few understand this paradox better than Keanu Reeves, an A-list actor who rides the subway, waits in line for his own movie premieres, and sits on park benches eating sandwiches like any ordinary person. Despite starring in blockbusters that have earned billions worldwide, Keanu has always seemed slightly detached from Hollywood's glitter and glamour. His humility and generosity have become legendary, from giving away millions of his Matrix earnings to the special effects team to quietly funding children's hospitals without seeking recognition. But what if, after decades in the spotlight, the weight of celebrity finally became too heavy?
What if the man who played Neo decided to take the ultimate red pill, escaping the matrix of fame entirely? November 2023, Toronto International Film Festival. Keanu had just finished a whirlwind press tour for his latest film. Night after night of the same questions, the same forced smiles for cameras, the same invasion of his personal space. That evening, in his hotel room overlooking the city where he spent much of his childhood, he made a decision that had been forming in his mind for years. "I need to disappear," he whispered to himself, looking at his reflection in the window. Not for publicity, not for a role, but for himself. The plan required precise execution. First, a call to his financial advisor to restructure his assets. Unlike many celebrities who fall prey to extravagance, Keanu had always lived relatively modestly. This made the transition easier. Next, he contacted a small circle of trusted friends, including his longtime stunt double and confidant Jackson, to help orchestrate what would effectively be his vanishing act. "Are you absolutely sure about this?" Jackson asked during their encrypted video call. "You know, once you do this, there's no easy way back." Keanu's eyes reflected a calm determination that Jackson had only seen when the actor was preparing for his most challenging roles. "I've spent 30 years being someone else for the camera," Keanu replied. "I need to remember who I am when no one's watching." Over the next month, the groundwork was laid. A substantial portion of his fortune was quietly transferred to various charitable foundations, cancer research being closest to his heart due to his sister Kim's battle with leukemia years ago. The remainder was placed in secure, anonymous investments that would support his new life. Through channels typically used by witness protection programs, he acquired a new identity, Thomas Anderson, an ironic nod to Neo's original name in The Matrix. The documentation was flawless, the digital footprint carefully constructed to withstand scrutiny. A history of work as a freelance editor and motorcycle mechanic explained both his intellect and his practical skills. On December 31st, 2023, while the world prepared to celebrate the new year, Keanu Reeves attended his last Hollywood party. He was quieter than usual, some observed, but no one suspected anything extraordinary. At precisely 11:45 p.m., he excused himself to get some air. He never returned to the party. By dawn, he was driving a nondescript used truck across state lines, his famous motorcycles left behind as too identifiable. His destination, a small coastal town in the Pacific Northwest, where residents prided themselves on minding their own business. Woodhaven, population 3142, was known for its artisanal community, independent bookstores, and stunning ocean views. It was the kind of place where newcomers weren't unusual. Artists, writers, and craftspeople often sought refuge there from urban exhaustion. Thomas Anderson would be just another soul seeking peace. He rented a modest cabin on the outskirts of town, paid 6 months in advance, and began to establish his new routine. A beard and slightly different hairstyle, combined with simple wire-rimmed glasses, created a surprising amount of anonymity. The truth about facial recognition is that people see what they expect to see, and no one expected Keanu Reeves to be buying groceries at their local market. The first month was the hardest. Decades of having people cater to his needs, schedule his days, and handle life's minutiae had left Keanu somewhat unprepared for the absolute solitude of his new existence. He found himself waking at 4 a.m., disoriented, reaching for a phone that wasn't there, to check messages that no longer arrived. But slowly, a new rhythm emerged. Mornings began with Tai Chi overlooking the ocean, a practice he had learned for a role, but now embraced for himself. Afternoons were spent either working on vintage motorcycles in a small workshop he rented under his new name, or reading the classics he'd always claimed to love but never had time to properly explore. It was at Seabound Books, Woodhaven's cherished independent bookstore, that Thomas Anderson began to connect with the local community. The owner, Eleanor Matthews, a sharp-witted woman in her 60s who had escaped corporate publishing 20 years earlier, needed help cataloging a massive collection recently acquired from an estate sale. "You have a good eye for first editions," she remarked, after watching him carefully examine a weathered copy of East of Eden. "I've had some experience," he replied, with that slight smile those who knew Keanu would recognize immediately. Eleanor didn't ask many questions about Thomas's past, a courtesy he deeply appreciated. Instead, she offered him part-time work, helping with the bookstore's inventory and special orders. The position paid modestly, but offered something priceless, a sense of normalcy and purpose. As weeks turned to months, Thomas Anderson became a quiet fixture in Woodhaven. He volunteered at the local literacy center, teaching adults to read, joined a community effort to restore the town's historic lighthouse, and occasionally played bass guitar at open mic nights at the Driftwood Tavern, though never well enough to draw unwanted attention. Life was simple, anonymous, and for the first time in decades, entirely his own. No one asked for autographs, no one took surreptitious photos while he ate, no paparazzi lurked outside his home. The constant vigilance that had become second nature began to fade, replaced by a genuine ease he had almost forgotten was possible. It was during a spring storm that Thomas met Claire Sullivan, the town's veterinarian. He had found an injured cormorant on the beach and brought it to her clinic just before closing. "Most people wouldn't have bothered," she said, gently examining the bird's wing. "I'm not most people," he replied, immediately regretting how pretentious it sounded. But Claire just laughed, a genuine, unguarded sound that made him realize how rarely he heard authentic laughter in his previous life. Their friendship developed organically over coffee discussions about literature, philosophy, and their shared love of motorcycles. Claire rode a vintage Triumph that had belonged to her father. She was divorced, pragmatic, and refreshingly direct. Most importantly, she saw him only as Thomas Anderson, a quiet, thoughtful man with no agenda or celebrity baggage. For nearly a year, the masquerade held. Keanu Reeves' absence from Hollywood had been noted, of course, with his management releasing carefully worded statements about taking a sabbatical to focus on personal projects. Without new scandals or films to fuel interest, the speculation gradually waned, as it always does in the fast-moving entertainment world. Then came the photograph that threatened everything. A tourist from Seattle visiting Woodhaven's Summer Art Festival captured a candid shot of the town's residents gathered around a community mural project. Thomas Anderson was barely visible in the background, helping to lift a panel into place. The tourist posted the image on social media with the caption, "Beautiful day in Woodhaven. Love how the whole town comes together." 3 days later, a Reddit thread appeared. "Is that Keanu Reeves hiding in Oregon?" The post initially garnered little attention, dismissed as yet another case of mistaken identity in the long tradition of Elvis and Tupac sightings. But then a film blogger with a significant following picked up the story, analyzing the photograph with facial recognition software and publishing a convincing comparison. Keanu Reeves living secret life in Oregon town screamed the headline on a popular gossip site by the end of the week. Thomas Anderson learned about the breaking story from Eleanor, who showed him the article on her iPad with a concerned expression. "Anything you want to tell me, Thomas?" she asked. That evening, Thomas called an emergency meeting with the few people in Woodhaven he had grown to trust. Eleanor, Claire, the owner of the workshop where he restored motorcycles, and the Lighthouse Preservation Committee head. Thomas Anderson was barely visible in the background, helping to lift a panel into place. The tourist posted the image on social media with the caption, "Beautiful day in Woodhaven." In Claire's living room, with rain pattering against the windows, he revealed his true identity. "I came here to find peace," he explained, after the initial shock had subsided, "to remember what it's like to be a person rather than a persona." Claire was the first to speak after a long silence. "So, all those times I made you watch your own movies on movie night?" The tension broke as they all laughed, Thomas hardest of all. "What will you do now?" Eleanor asked, the practical one as always. It was the question he had been asking himself since seeing the article. Already 2 cars with out-of-town plates had been spotted slowly driving past his cabin. It would only be hours, perhaps days, before photographers and reporters descended on Woodhaven, disrupting not just his peace, but the entire community. "I could run again," he said quietly. "Create another identity, find another town. Or," Claire suggested, taking his hand, "you could stop running." That night, Thomas Anderson made the hardest decision of his new life. The next morning, a simple statement appeared on the official Keanu Reeves social media accounts, dormant for nearly a year. "For the past year, I have been living privately as a citizen rather than a celebrity. I ask respectfully for the privacy of the community that has shown me such kindness and acceptance. They do not deserve to have their lives disrupted. I will address questions at an appropriate time and place of my choosing. Until then, I am still on sabbatical." Predictably, media outlets descended on Woodhaven within hours, but they found something unexpected: a unified community standing guard. Local shops refused to speak to reporters. Residents gave deliberately misleading directions. The sheriff politely but firmly enforced ordinances against loitering and trespassing. And Thomas Anderson, now acknowledged as Keanu Reeves, was nowhere to be found. In truth, he was hiding in plain sight, temporarily residing in the lighthouse keeper's quarters, accessible only through the main building, where Eleanor and the Preservation Committee ran interference. From his window, he could see the reporters gradually thinning as days passed with no sightings or stories. 2 weeks later, he agreed to a single interview with a respected journalist known for integrity rather than sensationalism. They met at the lighthouse with the understanding that Woodhaven would not be identified by name or specific location. "Why did you disappear?" was the first question. "I didn't disappear," Keanu corrected gently. "I simply stepped out of the frame to remember what the whole picture looks like." The resulting article, titled "The Man Who Walked Away," painted a thoughtful portrait of a celebrity seeking authentic connection in an increasingly artificial world. Rather than scandal or mockery, the piece prompted conversations about fame, privacy, and the human need for genuine community. In the aftermath, Keanu negotiated a new reality that preserved elements of both worlds. He maintained his residence in Woodhaven, now openly as himself, while selectively returning to film projects that truly inspired him. The town, after surviving its 15 minutes of fame, returned to its peaceful rhythms, though now with the occasional surreal sight of a famous director or actor visiting their local resident. Claire and Keanu's relationship deepened, built on the foundation of who they were to each other, rather than his public persona.
Eleanor's bookstore became a sanctuary where he could host private readings and discussions without publicity. And the lighthouse, restored with an anonymous donation, became a symbol of guidance between two worlds. When asked in a later interview if he regretted his year of anonymity once it ended, Keanu considered the question carefully. "I think we all wear masks," he finally replied. "The trick isn't finding which mask is real, it's realizing that what's behind all of them is what matters. I needed to remember who I was when no one was watching. Now I can be that person, even when everyone is." This story reminds us that sometimes our dreams of escape aren't really about running away, but about finding our way back to ourselves. And perhaps the real freedom isn't in disappearing completely, but in being fully present in whatever life we choose. What about you? Have you ever dreamed of starting fresh somewhere no one knows you? What would your new life look like? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this what-if celebrity story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more.